This is the Solid Signal podcast for the week of April 26, 2021. So let's get started with an admission. If you go ahead and listen to earlier editions of the Solid Signal podcast from this time every year, you're going to hear something pretty similar. I always talk about the Oscars, and I always talk about how they've lost touch with the common person and how they fail to recognize that one of the really critical things about movies or any form of entertainment is that they be able to reach people and that they be able to connect with people, and that art by itself without somebody enjoying it is really not even a thing. But you can go back and listen to previous podcasts about that, because I want to rail about this particular Oscars ceremony. Look, I'm going to give it to the folks at the Oscars for trying. They definitely get A for effort. This is the first award ceremony of the sort to be in person in any way in a long time. And they did a good job of maintaining balance where they showed, okay, we can have some sort of in-person event, and at the same time, we can prove that we're doing it safely and not encourage people to do the same thing unsafely. So they get a lot of credit for that. They get a lot of credit for working with the major entertainment outlets, for coordinating that without having a just like crazy red carpet experience that was way too busy. That's all good stuff. But then I want to talk about the Oscars ceremony itself. Right off the bat, I saw one big problem. We've been talking for decades about how the best films aren't accessible to the whole country, and how there aren't theaters that can show these films, and how if people were just exposed to these wide varieties of films, that it would really make a difference. And guess what? I guess that's not true. With movie theaters closed, the Oscars made a change in the rules to allow a lot of films that only showed online to be eligible for the ceremony. And that's great, because you got to see a lot of these films, and they were accessible to people. If you wanted to see Minari or Sound of Metal or any of the films out there, United States versus Billie Holiday, a lot of the stuff was available online as, part of a streaming service that you probably already get. And that's great. And it's also good because there really weren't the kind of blockbusters this year that there could have been, because most of them were postponed until 2021 instead of taking place in 20, being released then as they were expected to be. But instead of saying how great it was that all of these films are available to average folks, and saying how important it is for average people to have access to this kind of entertainment and not just, comic booky, popcorn, roller coaster kind of movies, nothing was said of that sort. And instead, there was a passionate plea about reopening movie theaters and how these films are only intended to be seen on a large screen, which I totally don't buy at all. I absolutely do not buy that. I think that's ridiculous. I think that it's better to have something consumed in a way that makes sense to the person who's consuming it, as opposed to not being consumed at all. A lot of movie theaters are not going to come back. That is a simple fact. And the Academy needs to understand that the relationship, the equation has changed, and that they need to find a way to wrap their heads around people consuming movies their own way. They no longer have control over the movie-going experience, because it's going to be in your home. It's going to be in your pocket or the palm of your hand. It's going to be wherever you choose to consume that film, and not in a theater. That change is not going to go back to the way things were. And the Academy needs to roll with that. They've taken the heat in the past for not keeping up with other trends. And I think it's time that they realize that, this persistent idea of you must go to the theater, you must go to the theater, you must go to the theater, is not gaining them any fans. The other thing that I'll say, and a lot of other outlets are talking about today, is that In Memoriam segment was really just rushed. The pacing was too fast. The music was too peppy. And I don't know what the thought was there. Oh, well, this is a year that has seen so much death and so much loss that let's have an In Memoriam segment that just makes you feel good, makes you want to dance a jig. I don't really understand what they were talking about. And it seemed like they were running the whole thing way, way, way too fast, as if they decided at the very last minute that they didn't have 7 minutes and they only had 3 minutes, and they hastily reassembled it as quickly as possible with the music that they had on hand. I mean, that's really what it seemed like. And there were some high profile people who were missed, and I mean no disrespect to them either, because there are some folks that always get missed, and it's inevitable, and it's a shame when it does happen. But it's funny how some of the more high-profile misses did appear apparently on the Academy's website, according to other sources, and somehow didn't make it into the in memoriam segment. Well, look, people aren't perfect, and the person putting together that segment wasn't perfect. But whatever the instructions were, it did not work out. And then the whole thing, the other thing that's being mentioned a lot is I think the Academy was counting on a win for Chadwick Boseman for Best Actor, and well-deserved. I mean, this was a quality individual, and I don't want to say anything negative about this person who really dedicated their life to doing something they loved and did it very well. But they moved the Best Actor category after Best Picture, and the feeling is they probably did it to capitalize on ending on a high note. Chadwick Boseman's going to win it, and everybody's going to be happy, and we're going to say goodnight. And that didn't happen. What did happen was Sir Anthony Hopkins won. By the way, the Academy gets another ding for not saying Sir Anthony Hopkins. They just said Anthony Hopkins. Apparently, Sir Anthony had gone to bed because he didn't think he was going to win. And so he didn't really accept the award, and they just cut very quickly because, and that's the other thing, we all knew that the show was running late. It always runs late. In years past, they've had musical segments that they can cut, and we knew they couldn't do that. We knew that some of the acceptance speeches were going on way, way, way too long, much like perhaps you think this podcast is, but that's another whole thing. So they even had one of the announcements as they went to commercial saying something like, trust us, the show really is on time. Don't worry about it. Everything will be fine. And they ended, 28 minutes late or something like that, whatever the number was. The truth is that the pacing was really not good, and there were a lot of things about it that didn't make sense, when they did it, where they did it, how they did it. And I know a lot of this stuff was the first time they'd ever done this kind of event. So they get a lot of credit from me for trying stuff. Yes, they do. But every year that the Oscars tries things, there are things that work out and things that do not work out. And a lot of things in this show didn't work out. All in all, we know that the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences is a very conservative, that is to say, old thinking kind of organization. I don't mean politically conservative necessarily. We know that they're slow to change. We know that it takes a lot for them to admit that it's time to change on something. And hopefully by the time next year rolls around, well, look, they can go back to doing the Oscars whatever way they want. I'm going to give a 50-50 shot that they're going to haul out Billy Crystal again, because they're going to want to go back to that really traditional musical number-based hosted kind of thing to prove, hey, we can do that. We know what we're doing, and it's going to seem kind of familiar, and we're glad that we get back to it, and it's also going to seem incredibly stale. Instead of the Academy really reforming not just the Oscars, but their point of view, to realize that the entire equation, the entire relationship that people have with entertainment has fundamentally changed, and it's not going to go back. And that while I give this Oscars credit for including more diversity and more different kinds of stories than ever before, which is great, I do not give them credit for this kind of oppressive feeling they have, this kind of focus on how movies have to be seen in theaters. Because if they return to the idea that only movies that show in theaters qualify for the Oscars, then a lot of films are going to miss out. And maybe the next time a film like The United States versus Billie Holiday won't even be nominated. And that's a shame. While that was a flawed film, there were a lot of performances in it I liked. Anyway, that's about it for this supersized Solid Signal podcast. I hope that you like and subscribe, because that's what makes me look good to my bosses. I sure do appreciate it. Leave a comment anywhere where you get this podcast, and I hope I see you again next week for for next edition of the Solid Signal Podcast.